everybody. Welcome back to Inspiring Beauty and Believers. I am your host, Song, and today we are going to be talking about midweek mindset shifts. So, this is a new series that I'm starting for you guys just to tie in, why it's important to change your mindset. So, you remove yourself from the old way of thinking and come into a new way of thinking so that your lifestyle will change. Because we know if we don't change the way that we think, then we won't change the way that we're speaking, which won't change the results that we are getting in our life. So joining us today, we have Adrienne. Hi,
Hi. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a privilege, and I'm excited to see what comes out of this.
I'm excited too. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you do as a emotional wellness coach.
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yes. So my name is Adrienne Smith, and I am an emotional wellness coach. My company is called Harbor for Healing, Coaching, and Development. And I work specifically with a lot of women, but also there's been some men involved in this as well, dealing with mindsets and also healing from, unresolved emotions, unresolved issues, toxic things that may have happened, past traumas, childhood traumas, those type of things. And, it's really good because a lot of the mindsets that we have as adults were shaped and even birthed in childhood. And because we carry all of that stuff throughout our lives, a lot of the things that we grew up with that are still in operation are either outdated or they no longer apply, but yet we're still using those same mindsets, and it's causing detriment in people's lives, and they don't realize it a lot of times. So this is a good topic to discuss. It's right in my wheelhouse, and I'm looking forward to see what the outcome is.
So I love that you targeted what happens in our childhood, how that sets up our mindset, because that is something that's like the primary thing that I talk about with my guests every single week is the parental abandonment issues that they have to overcome in order to be able to have healthy relationships, and how the relationships that they had with their parents, whether their parents were there or not there, has formulated toxic relationships in their adulthood. I know personally for myself, I went through a lot of bad relationships, a lot of toxic relationships, marriages and otherwise. And then also just recently, last year, I learned about codependency and dealing with narcissism and things like that I never knew was an issue for me until how with the onion, you pull back one layer and then, oh, there's another layer. So, I found another layer I got another thing that I have to deal with that I didn't realize was something that started in my childhood. And it was like a ticking time bomb that went off when I became an adult.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's usually the way that it is we get into these patterns or cycles of things that, we attract to or attracted to us because of that wounding that happened as kids. And, even from a spiritual aspect, there's things that happen even in utero that you don't even recognize. And then the things that you experience as a kid, whether, mom or dad may not have been present, one, other, or both, you may have been in foster care or adopted, or if your parents were even in the home, their parents, especially the older generations, they were mostly operating out of that survival mentality. So because everything was, I just got to do what I got to do to survive, nobody really dealt with any of the, I was molested as a child, or, I was abandoned. They had their own issues that they never dealt with. So unfortunately, if you grow up in a household where your parents are either emotionally void or they're unable to connect with their child because they're still dealing with their own issues, and they can't help their child along, then that's for, like you said, those relationships that are toxic, but yet because you're seeking to fill a void that was never filled when you were a child, you're seeking that love relationship from, someone that you didn't get as a child, or there was perceived rejection. Because a lot of times, some of the things that we experience as a child, it's perception, not necessarily reality. So you perceive something is wrong, and then as kids, you internalize it and you make it about you, even though it may not have had anything to do with you. But there's all these things that shape us as kids, and we grow up with that, and then we're still operating out of it, and we get with these people that look like they might fill whatever void it is that we have, only to find out that we're connecting on a trauma level, because 9 times out of 10, that's what you're really connecting on is, oh, we have kind of similar backgrounds and similar upbringing, and so you connect on that level, but it's all toxicity. And I know I just said a whole lot, so I hope that.
Yes, I'm over here trying not to like throw pillows and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, like all of that. Like I was like, yep, trauma bonding. Yep, that perception. It'd be all over the place. It is, but it's so real. It's so good. I worked in behavioral health for 3 years, and although I loved it, it was emotionally draining because at that time I did not know, about codependency issues, but because I just wanted to fix everybody. Like I did not have boundaries because I did not know about that. So I was just jumping into people's issues and trying to help them. And it was that trauma bond in my personal relationships and my professional relationships where I was like, I just want to help you, like get you all back together. And we can't fix other people's stuff. It's up to them to want to fix it. So we can only work on ourselves. But that perception is like a really, like my brother and I were having a conversation about that. And he was talking about, as a child, the perceptions that you have when you feel like, your parents don't want you or they're not there, whatever the case may be. Like, for instance, in his story, and you guys know if you've seen his videos, he was raised by my grandparents and by my uncle and aunt. And as a child, he felt like it was because our mom didn't want him. But in the truth of the matter, when he became an adult and started working through his issues and really actually having a conversation with her, it was because she felt like the men that she had around her, she knew they were not, even though she knew that they weren't good father figures for her children, she still had to work through her own stuff to not be in a relationship.
Right.
With them. She knew enough to know she didn't want these people influencing her kids. So she gave him to the people she trusted to give him the type of life that he deserved to have. And it wasn't because she didn't want him, because she loved him enough to not bring him into the foolishness that she was dealing with. Right.
And that is a very good example of how our perception as kids, we see it as, oh, she sent me to live here, so she must not love me. She must not want me. When all actuality is that she knew that I got my own stuff to work through. And unfortunately, he doesn't need to be around this. He doesn't need to see this. He doesn't need to, experience this. So even though she was doing the best that she thought she could with what she had, there was still a level of wounding just because of the perceived, rejection and abandonment. And I know that as kids, we go through a lot of that because even with my own parents, they grew up in poverty. And so when you grow up in poverty, that also creates a mindset. So when you live and you operate out of that, because your parents weren't there, they grew up in single parent homes, and there were multiple kids, so that meant that back then mom usually was working all the time, so the kids kind of had to raise themselves, or there was one older one that would take care of the younger ones, and so you grow up with that mindset. And, you may have been or felt neglected, perceived, neglection.
Right.
And in some ways it was real. And so when you get that, then you feel the neglect. And, to add to the fact that, there wasn't a whole lot of money in that, in the household. So now you're not getting, what you feel that you should, in comparison to maybe your classmates, your friends, and other relatives either.
Mm.
And so all of that shapes you as a person. And then you have kids. And because, say, your dad wasn't in the household, so now you don't have any frame of reference for what being a father really looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And your mother worked all the time, and so you didn't really have that nurturing relationship with your mother. So then you have a kid, and now you don't know how to be that nurturing mother because you didn't have that modeled for you. Because that's how we learn as kids a lot of times, is with these interpersonal relationships, is through demonstration. It's through seeing it around us and other people. So when you grow up without those things and you have no frame of reference for that, and we know TV is absolutely terrible. Right. you can't base any of that on TV. So you grow up in that, and then you act it out as an adult, and then you perpetuate that cycle until somebody finally comes to realization of what's going on and says enough is enough, and puts a stop to it and says, I don't want to continue this cycle. I don't want to, I don't want my kids to grow up the way that I did. And I know a lot of times we say that, but what action are we really putting to that to ensure that that does not happen?
And that's what I want to get into now. So how would you say, as a coach, how would you say is the best way to help somebody begin to start changing that mindset? Because we can all say, I don't want to be like that. And I know a lot of times people are like, I'll never be like my parents. I'll never do this stuff. And then they end up doing the same exact things their parents did because they never knew how to shift that mindset. How do we do that?
So what I normally tell my clients is, and biblical, because I speak from a total, biblical perspective. As a man thinketh, so is he, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the Bible says. So you have to recognize what it is you're thinking. What is your mindset? What actions are coming out of that? And what's the root of it? I'm a big lay the axe to the root person. So you have to know what the root of it is. First of all, what's the behavior? What is it that you're doing that is similar? You got to recognize it first. Mm-hmm. What is it that you are doing, that is similar to your parents? It's something that you don't want to continue. You have to know what it is. So recognizing what it is first, because a lot of times we just go and go and go. And we have that mindset of, oh, that's just who I am. That's just how I am. Well, not necessarily, because if it, and I'm from the perspective, if it's not in line with God's word, then that's not how you were created.
Exactly.
Now, the way you grew up and the things that may have happened during that time has shaped you into the person that you are, with the mindset, behaviors, attitudes, whatever. But that doesn't mean that that's how you were created. So to get to the root of who you were truly created to be, you have to, like you said, the onion, you have to begin to peel back those layers. So once you recognize what it is that is similar to your parents that you don't want to continue, mm-hmm. So then you need to deconstruct that. Where did that behavior come from? Was it you? Was it your parents? Was it potentially your grandparents? You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of things that are passed down that we don't recognize. And even there are people that may not have even grown up around those people, but yet the behaviors are the same.
Right.
So then that's a DNA generational type thing.
Exactly.
And then, so you have to recognize where that came from. And then, you have to get into that mindset of being intentional of change. So, you can saying it isn't just it. You have to put some action to it. And you have to retrain yourself to know that, okay, this isn't right. Step back. Let's do this differently.
Right.
Let's put some action to it. Let's do this differently. Let's say things differently. You have to retrain yourself, but you got to recognize it first and then identify the root of it. And then let's lay the axe to the root. So if it's a matter of just totally shifting your mindset in that moment to, okay, I don't want to react that way. What's a better way? And usually this is where I would tell people to pray and ask the Lord, how should I respond in this situation? Because previously I would have responded this way.
Right.
But now I want to do this differently. Lord, how do I respond in this? Or how should I think about this? And if it's an issue of, someone that's operating out of rejection, because most of us have some levels of that, then it's okay. Is this truly rejection, or is this my perception is feeling? Because it feels similar as to something that happened in the past. So if it's something that feels similar, then Lord, show me the truth of it. Show me the reality of it, because it feels similar, but that doesn't mean that that's what it is. Let me see it from the real perspective. And I know I'm talking a lot, so I'm gonna stop here.
No, you are good. Listen. So when you were talking about, that perception and how it may feel similar to something that may have happened previously, I immediately remember a sermon that my pastor was doing, and he was saying how, if you have this one person, and this one person, they were rejected by somebody, and then they come in contact and they say, I'll never deal with that again. I'll never be hurt like that again. And they come in contact with somebody else, totally different person, and they do something that triggers in them a feeling that happened with that other person. They immediately shut that person off, and then they just start blocking themselves off, and it gets easier and easier for them to shut the door on people because they've never dealt with that initial root of rejection from that one person. Those other people, their intention may have not been to reject you at all. They may have, a big thing is sometimes people don't deal with correction well because they automatically assume somebody is trying to reject them or hurt them, or, like somebody else.
Right.
And so then they can never actually accept change in their life because they don't know how to accept correction, because they always think somebody's out to attack them because they won't deal with that root of that issue. And so I just, I feel like we have to learn how to separate these things. We definitely have to pray and talk to the Lord about that. I know one of the biggest things with me as being a mother, when my kids were very young, my oldest, he's 16 now. I would not whoop him when he was little. And my friends would tell me, you need to whoop him. He has to have discipline, or he's just going to run rapid. And I was like, I can't, because I was so used to being whooped or getting in trouble out of anger. Like, I did not want that to be what I did to my kids as well. And so they would do things, and then I would get really angry, and I'm like, I don't know how to not do this. And so the Lord had to really deal with me on, because I was like, listen, now he just do whatever he wants, and I'm just not doing anything. And I was like, Lord, you really have to help me with this, because I know that my kids have to have discipline, but I don't know how to do it and not be angry and flip out on them. And so I was telling a friend this, she laughed at me, but I was like, but this is the way that the Lord worked with me. Like, when my kids would do stuff, I was like, I'm not going to talk to you right now, because I need to go pray and worship and put on some praise music so I can get my whole life together before I can discipline you on this situation. It sounds crazy. Like, you listen to praise music before you about to whoop your kids? Yes, I did. I don't do it anymore, but like at that time, it's what I needed in order to transition my mindset out of being angry and going Hulk on my kids. And then somebody called, child services on me because I'm in here like moonwalking on my kids. Because I was like, hey, they don't listen. And so, I hear many times, like, there's no manual on how to raise your kids. And I know people write lots and lots of books about it. I have written a book about, parenting and how I did my stuff. But every situation, even every child in your household, they are not the same. And you have to go to their creator, the creator of all of us, but who's the God that specifically created them, and say, how do I discipline, talk to, work with this specific child? Because the same discipline you use for one kid may not work for the next kid. And you have to be open to understanding that you have to switch it up sometimes, and you can't parent out of your own trauma. That's what I had to learn.
Right.
I didn't want my kids to have to need therapy from their childhood. And not saying that therapy is a bad thing. I see a therapist, y'all know, I'll be like, you have Jesus and have a therapist. It's important.
Yes.
Both of those work together. But I didn't want my kids to be like, my whole childhood was messed up. My mama was crazy, and now I got to see a therapist so I don't be crazy. So, I think it's important. I think it's important to have those things and to work on your own stuff so that you're not passing it on to another generation. And that was a lot of conversations that I had with my grandmother about things that happened in her generation and how she passed it on to her kids. And we would joke about things, but it was real life stuff. Like, she was like, yeah, I'll moonwalk on my kids. That's why I talk about moonwalking on your kids. That's what my grandma said. So she was like, I'll moonwalk on them. They wasn't acting right. And I'm like, we laugh, but I'm like, that was child abuse.
Right.
And then we just keep passing it down. And then we say, what happens in this house, stay in this house. But like, if you got to beat your kids because you angry, you're not helping them to grow into the adults that God called them to be. And then they going to have to work through this trauma. And we don't want to continue to pass this stuff on. That's why we have to change the way we think about it.
Have Uncle Charlie, and I'm just throwing a name out there, who has molested all the kids, all the little, the cousins and nephews and these relatives in the family, the incest and the molestation that happens in families. Everybody knows about it, but nobody talks about it.
Exactly.